Okay, so I think this is going to be a really important discussion we're going to have here. Do you dread work because someone there is making life miserable for you? If so, you're not alone. Workplace bullying is rampant in workplaces throughout North America and around the world. And Dr. Lisa Barrow has written a book about this. It's called In Darkness, Light Dawns, Exposing Workplace Bullying. Lisa, welcome to Lifeline. Good to have you here in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
You came across the border from Canada, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Port Colborne, Ontario.
Oh, great. All right. Well, it's good to have you here. And we often talk about bullying in schools, and it's a real big problem. But kids grow up, and they end up being bullies when they're older. It's just a different scene, and the stakes are much higher. But you always have a bully on the playground. And I want you to share your story before we talk specifically about the bullying issue. You've been a follower of Christ for how long?
For about 25 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so what happened? You had a couple of really bad experiences, didn't you? Unpack it for us.
Yes, I did. I worked in the automotive industry for several years, and encountered my first workplace bully, and didn't really realize that I was being bullied at the time, when a new manager came into the department. And at the time I was working on my master's degree from Buffalo State, and I was studying industrial technology, and I was working on a subject known as just-in-time manufacturing. And the individual who came into the department was hired in as a guru for just-in-time manufacturing. I was pretty excited about the opportunity and thought that we could learn from each other. After probably about 3 or 4 months, I realized that she didn't know as much about just-in-time manufacturing as she led everyone to believe. And she was basically pretty intimidated by me because I was writing my thesis on the issue. So initially it started off that she wanted to help me to progress through the organization and to be promoted. However, what happened was whenever I would try to excel, she would always change the bar, set the bar, the level higher, or became very demanding. And berated me at times. And at first I thought, well, this must be the culture of the organization, working in manufacturing. I had seen this behavior before. But it didn't matter what I did. She continued to bully me. And as I said, I did not realize that was going on.
Yeah. Many times we try to explain it away. Maybe because it's so common, right?
That is so true. Because in manufacturing, and one of the things that I want to say is bullying occurs in every industry. But with my experience being in manufacturing, I saw people yelling at each other, and it was the culture. So I ended up leaving that organization and went to another automotive organization. And
you're thinking, this is going to be better. I'm out of that situation. And now, thank you, Lord, for delivering me. It was like the parting of the Red Sea. I could hear the angels singing. Here I go. This is the promised land where I'm going. What happened next?
What happened was I ended up in a situation where I was physically assaulted by one of the employees.
Physically assaulted?
Yes, physically assaulted.
What happened?
Well, to make a long story short, the employee was in my department, and I was giving him instructions for the day, and he basically did not like that. And next thing I knew, I was up in the air, and he had me in a bear hug, and who knows what he was going to do.
Okay, wait a minute.
Yes,
so you did this. I know it happened quickly.
Yes, it was quick.
But what was going through your mind? Were you thinking, this cannot be happening?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I basically said to the individual, put me down. I recognized that I was still in the workplace environment, and it was he said, I don't know what happened. And so what I did was I reported it to my manager at the time, and the manager said he would take care of it. And I said, okay, because I was fairly new at the organization.
Don't want to make waves, et cetera, et cetera.
Protocol and the whole bit.
Yeah.
Well, a few weeks later, I was talking to a friend of mine who was in upper management, she had been away, and so she was asking me, how was work going, because I was fairly new there, and so I shared my experience with her. And she was quite upset about what had happened and said, well, I wasn't aware of it. And make a long story short, Human Resources was involved in the situation and found out that the manager did not report the incident and did not handle the incident properly. So a few people were disciplined.
Yeah.
And at the end of that episode, the bullying began for me. So any opportunity that I would have had to move up the corporate ladder was squelched as a result of reporting the fact that I was not going to be treated in this manner.
Yeah. So was your boss kind of bullying you after this because it
yes.
reflected poorly on him?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because he ended up with 2 weeks off. He was disciplined, and a couple
Right.
other people were disciplined. Right. So the reason why I wanted to talk about workplace bullying is because sometimes an incident happens and it changes the course, changes the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And we go along thinking that life is good and we're doing the right thing. But what happens is when a person is in a situation where either they may be smarter than their boss or a colleague, or maybe they stand up for themselves and
Yeah.
say, I'm not going to be treated this way, as was the case for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes that person becomes or is seen as not a team player.
Boy, I know what you're
Not
talking
a team
about.
player,
Yeah.
because in the environment, the last situation, it was not uncommon for managers to yell and scream at each other, employees to yell and scream at each other.
Yeah.
It was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And for someone to stand up, especially as a Christian, to say this type of behavior is not acceptable, or as a leader in an organization like that to say, I will not mistreat people in this manner, automatically sets you apart and makes you different.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when an individual is different or is perceived to be different in the workplace, and he or she has a boss who may be a bully, then the bully may begin to work on that person.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that happens is in workplace bullying is the goal is to devalue the individual.
Yeah.
The goal is to make that person feel that he or she is not as smart as he or she thinks. They're not as talented. And then they take it a little step further and they want other people to begin to believe that that particular person is not the person everyone perceives them to be. And so here the person is going along and working and wondering why she's not being promoted, wondering why people are not talking to them anymore. And it is because a bully has come along and has identified that person as the target.
Okay, so as a follower of Christ, this is a big, big question, and we're going to get to this after the break. How do you respond? I mean, Jesus told us to turn the other cheek. You know, Jesus said, pray for your enemies. There are a lot of approaches to this, and the way that we handle this type of situation is different, perhaps, I would imagine, than somebody who doesn't know Jesus. I mean, we're going to be different. But that being said, where is the line? Where are the boundary lines drawn in terms of what do I say? What do I do? And you were talking about leaders or bosses. Bullies are basically insecure people. Mark Batterson, he's a pastor out of Washington, D.C. He was our guest last week, and he said something previously to me. It wasn't on the show last week, but it's in regard to what we're talking about here. Listen to what he said. I think influence and insecurity are opposites. Insecure leaders don't hire high-competence people, thereby limiting their influence. Their insecurity manifests itself by surrounding themselves with people that will prop up their ego instead of taking things to the next level. And this is the clincher. It's the Saul complex. David was his greatest asset, but King Saul perceived him as his greatest threat. If you're insecure, assets are always perceived as threats.
I agree with that quote. And one of the things that I say to targeted people who are being bullied, I try to get them to look at the individual who is bullying them and to feel in a way, sorry for them because they're insecure. Because someone who is confident in him or herself, someone who values people, someone who feels good about him or herself, will not bully others. However, if I'm a leader and I may not be competent in this position, I may not be well liked, and someone comes along who is competent and is well liked, that is intimidating to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what I need to do is to make someone feel less than a person, so that I feel better about myself. So insecurity is a huge, huge factor in the bullying relationship.
So what do we do? And maybe you're listening to us today. This is where you're living your life. Maybe you just got off of work and you're driving home and you're thinking, man, today, it happened today on the job. What do you do? How do you respond as a follower of Christ? Lisa is with us for the balance of this hour. And if you have a question for her, I'm going to open up the telephone lines. And in fact, I've got a few copies of her books. She brought a bunch of copies, Lisa. Thank you very much. And we've got, 7 or 8 copies. And for those who call in this hour to make a comment or perhaps ask a question, we're going to place one of these books in your hands as long as they last, okay? As long as we have them to give away, we will do that. So we're going to take your calls, going to go to a break, update you on weather, give you a chance to head to the phones. Workplace bullying. Do you have a bully in your workplace? Do you wonder how you're supposed to respond to this? And in fact, are you afraid, at this moment? By the way, we're not over-dramatizing this. If you want to use an alias, you can do that because you're like, oh man, I'm going to be on the radio. I don't want my boss to hear. It's all right. We can keep things on the low down there, okay? We can use an alias if you want to. But we've got these books. If you call in to join in the conversation, we'll give you one as long as they last. The name of the book is In Darkness, Light Dawns, Exposing Workplace Bullying, and Lisa Barrow is our guest.
Sometimes an incident happens and it changes the course, changes the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And we go along thinking that life is good and we're doing the right thing. But what happens is when a person is in a situation where either they may be smarter than their boss or a colleague, or maybe they stand up for themselves and say, I'm not going to be treated this way, as was the case for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes that person becomes or is seen as not a team player.
Live with us in the studio, our guest, Lisa Barrow. She is the author of the book In Darkness, Light Dawns, Exposing Workplace Bullying. Do you have a bully in the workplace? How do you respond? You have a hop to the phones here in just a second, so bear with us. We're going to be taking your calls. Lisa Barrow is with us. In Darkness, Light Dawns is the name of her book, Exposing Workplace Bullying. And, we've got a few books that we're going to be giving away here. As long as they last, you join in the conversation. Maybe you have a question about a bully in your workplace. This has just been so hard for you, especially as a follower of Christ. We want to put these resources into your hands. So as long as they last, if you call in to join in the program for the balance of this hour, we will see that you get a free copy of this book. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing those extra books. Before we go to the phones, very, very important for us to provide a definition, because I guess it could be somewhat ambiguous, but what is the definition of workplace bullying? Some of us may be thinking there again, this just happens. People are people. How do you define it?
I define it as repetitive behavior that seeks to harm others. So if I come in one day and I'm your boss and I yell at you, and then the next day I come back and I apologize to you and I say, I'll never let that happen again.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry about that. Please forgive me. But if I come in and every day I'm yelling at you, I'm telling you you're useless, why did we hire you? If I'm constantly setting you up for failure, if I'm constantly putting you down in front of your colleagues, that happens over the course of time, a month, 3 months, years. In my case, it was several years.
Yeah.
That's workplace bullying, because bullying behavior devalues a person.
Yeah.
And one of the analogies that I like to use, and sometimes people get upset with me when I use it, it's very similar to waterboarding, where you think, if you're a prisoner and the enemy decides to drop drops of water on your forehead, you can handle it because it's just water. But what happens is eventually, drop after drop after drop, you will break psychologically, physically, emotionally.
Over time.
Over time.
Yeah.
And it's the same experience when a person has been bullied. Individuals who are bullied in the workplace, if it's not addressed, end up experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder.
This is serious.
It's a huge issue. 7% of individuals, and this is why I'm involved in trying to shed the light on workplace bullying, 7% of individuals consider suicide or homicide.
Wow.
7%.
I didn't realize that.
It's 7%, yes.
Okay. Well, you know what? This is serious business.
Yes,
I want to
it
get
is.
to the phones.
Yes.
Name of the book is In Darkness, Light Dawns. That's Lisa's book. And again, for everybody who makes it through on the phones this hour, we're going to, until they run out, give you a copy of this book. So let's just dive in. Elaine joins us from Brampton. Hi, Elaine. Welcome to Lifeline. Good to have you with us.
Oh, hi. Thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
As I was saying earlier, I just found your station just 2 days ago, and I have tuned my radio, and I was en route home, and I totally thought that God made this possible for me, because it's the same thing I'm experiencing, and I feel so heavy, you know, with this weight on my shoulder. And you just nailed it. You're like, you know, it's exactly what I'm experiencing.
Well, Elaine,
Yeah,
go ahead and unpack for us what you're dealing with, and I think Lisa might be able to point you in the right direction. Go for it.
Okay. Well, my situation is that my boss is very indifferent, and he might not be, say, very verbal, but with regards to the relationship, I don't even know what caused it, and then I don't want to be, I'm thinking, should I be talking to him about his coldness and indifference, or should I just let it, you know, time goes by, because he only speaks to me on a need-to basis, and it's very, especially when you work in very close quarters with an individual, it takes a toll on you as a person.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, okay, I could just not go back, and then, but when you are in a position where you do need the income and you have been with a company for several years, you know, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. And that's exactly what I'm experiencing. So, you know, I look forward to whether I get a copy of your book or have to go out and buy one, but really how to deal with this kind of thing in the workplace. Because when you have somebody that if you should say, go to them and they don't want to hear what you have to say, they would just, you know, end the conversation or say, you know, I don't want to talk about this, or I don't want, then
Right.
there's not much you can do.
I know, Elaine, it's a tough situation. By the way, we are going to send you a copy of the book. Lisa, go ahead and address this.
Yes, Elaine, first of all, I'm sorry that you are experiencing this. What typically happens with individuals who are targeted, they may be ostracized by their colleagues or their boss. What I would suggest that you do is to, in a proactive way, you may want to sit down and have a discussion with your boss and say, this is how I'm feeling, and is there something that I did to cause you to act this way? And just try to open up the dialogue that way. If the behavior continues, because this person is in a subtle way devaluing you, he or she does not value you. And what happens is he or she may treat you that way, and then your colleagues may begin to treat you as if you have the plague or whatever. So I'm a firm believer that we need to be proactive, and we as Christians have the courage to say to someone, I don't like the way that you're treating me, or this is how I'm feeling about the situation.
Yeah, but Lisa, let me say, what happens though if we say that and we're like, you know what, I'm poisoning the waters here, and if I do this, you don't know my boss, I'm dead meat. I mean, it sounds really good in theory, but if I do this, it's like pointing a gun at my head. Are we factoring God out of the process here if we do that?
Right. One of the things, and this is what you need to do, is pray about it. I always tell folks to, pray about the person who is bullying them, and ask God to to give you discernment as to how to interact with that person. Try to sit back and say, well, is the person shy? Does he or she treat other people this way? And just ask for discernment before you go forward and interact with that person.
Yeah.
But there comes a time when we have to say to others, in any type of relationship, I'm not feeling valued here, and I'm not quite clear as to why this is occurring. Could we please have a discussion? Yes, that may mean that it may open the door for more bullying to occur. This is where boundaries have to be set, and say, I come to work and I'm giving 110%, and I really want to create a very positive and respectful workplace environment.
Yeah.
And I need your assistance in order to do that.
Yeah. Elaine, I hope that helps you.
Well, I hope it will not, as you say, create a monster, because when the person is really the head of the company and you don't have much room for negotiation, then, you have to say, okay. But as she said, I pray about it a lot. I am one of those Charles Stanley fans that listen to him and try to take the teaching to heart.
Yeah.
And I do hope that it will resolve it, because it's really given me a very long day.
Yeah, and that's probably the understatement of the century. Elaine, thank you so much for being with us. We're going to send you Lisa's book, okay?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.